management. Representative Moore's community involvement includes roles with national and local organizations with a focus on access to world-class digital strategies for campaigns, electing new generational leaders, food security, gun violence, small business development, and youth wellness and development. Some of the organizations he has worked with are Tech for Campaigns, Win the Era, Lowcountry Food Bank, Brady Campaign to Prevent Gun Violence, Lowcountry Local First, and North Charleston Recreation Department. Representative Moore defeated 2018 Republican incumbent for the South Carolina House District 15 seat with a 52% win. Incumbent was Republican Assistant Majority Whip. This win caused Representative Moore to be the first Democrat to represent South Carolina House District 15. On November 3rd, 2020, Representative Moore won re-election again with 52% win margin. Representative Moore is first vice chair of Interstate Cooperation Committee and also serves on the Medical, Military, and Public and Municipal Affairs Committee. Representative Moore has been featured on CNN, Yahoo, C-SPAN, Fox News, CSNBC, MSNBC, to name a few. Representative Moore is a future new fellow and a recipient of the inaugural Run for Something Getting It Done Award. Representative Moore's father was a civil rights leader and community advocate. His mother is an educator and was the director of the Hampton County Committee on Betterment of Poor People. Moore is a graduate of Johnson & Wales University and the only professional chef elected to any state house in the country, and unfortunately he did not bring any food for us today. Maybe next time.
That's right.
He is the proud father of 16-month-old daughter, Moriah Love, which is a beautiful name, Moore. In 2015, Representative Moore's sister, Myra Thompson, was tragically murdered at the Mother Emanuel AME Church in Charleston, South Carolina. Later in the same year, his brother was also killed. These life events were the catalyst for him running for office and fueled the fire within him for public good. Let us welcome today our representative, Representative J.A. Moore. We will turn things over to him after we hear from attorney Eric Roden, who is the sponsor for today's event. Let's welcome him at this time.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. Not sure if this works. I'm Eric Roden. Use it to help? Okay, perfect. I just want to thank y'all for allowing us to sponsor this event and be here today. I'm a personal injury attorney. I have offices in Georgia and Florida. I moved up to Charleston last year and was fortunate enough to meet J.A. Representative Moore through some good friends and have gotten to get some good community involvement through him, learn about the folks in this area. And we were talking a couple of months ago. He said he had this event coming up. I said I'd love to be a part of it in any way that you can have me. In my line of work, I see people every day that are on their worst day. Amputations, burn injuries, people that have lost family members. And a lot of attorneys, I think, don't get as involved with their clients as I do. But when you work on someone's case for a year and a half, 2 years, in a lot of ways you become part of their family. You talk to them every day. You understand what they go through. And I see mental health and the effect it has on people in a way that's very personal that I think a lot of people never experience outside their own family. And it's absolutely a huge problem in our community. I've dealt with it myself at times with major life events. I know J.A. dealt with it with his siblings, and it shaped a lot of the man he is today. And it's an important topic that I think a lot of times, especially guys, are afraid or embarrassed to talk about. But putting it out there in the forefront, working to get money in the budget for it like J.A. has, it's huge. And I think the long-term effects of that are going to be fantastic for this community. Thank you for involving me today, J.A. And I'm set up outside with a booth. If anybody'd like to talk to me or have any questions about anything legal on your way out, please feel free to stop by, say hello. It's been lovely meeting all y'all, and I appreciate you having me. Thanks.
All right, y'all. Thank all of y'all for being here. I want to definitely thank the pastor of this beautiful church for hosting us today, and for my dear friend Eric Roden for sponsoring it. I'm gonna talk very briefly, and then I want to chop it up a little bit with my friend Charlamagne. Mental health for me is very personal. My brother James, most of his life, dealt with mental health challenges. And I remember my mom telling me a story after my brother passed away in 2015 about how when my brother James was in the second grade, a guidance counselor who was not equipped and did not have the experience to properly treat and or diagnose my brother with the challenges that he was facing as such a young person. They had the foresight to reach out to my family. And see, I'm originally, Charlamagne, from a smaller town than you in South Carolina, from Hampton. And my dad was born in 1930. He was African-American male of a certain age who had such a stigma on good mental health awareness and wellness. What he said to that guidance counselor would end up being with my brother the rest of his life. My son ain't crazy. No son of mine could possibly have any challenges. The counselor was white. The counselor's just saying that because my son is smart. And that would pretty much sum up my brother's entire life moving forward. What I mean by that is he never got the help he needed. As a family, we always said it was other things. It was because he joined the military, because he went to war, because he decided to use drugs. But the whole time, my brother just needed someone to talk to. My brother just needed proper medication and counseling. And so after my brother was killed in 2015, I've made it my life work to make sure that other families feel comfortable talking about mental health, good mental health awareness and wellness. Is why when I first got elected, with a good friend of mine, Gwen Goff, that's in the audience, we worked on the Health Education Act and got it passed and signed into law last year. And it's why after the tragic death of Jamal Sutherland, I fought really hard with some committed people here in this state to get additional $4.3 million in the budget for mental health awareness and wellness, but it's not enough. Those of you that keep up with mental health realize that we fund mental health in this state almost at the same funding levels as we did before the Great Recession in 2008, 2009. And Charlamagne alluded to it earlier. Just in Moncks Corner alone, the population has grown tremendously in the past 10, 12 years. And we're just woefully underfunded. So one of the reasons why I thought today was important, not only to honor Juneteenth and honor the life of Jamal Sutherland and so many other people, but for us to have real awareness in our community and hold us accountable as an elective office that can actually put the investments in mental health that is needed. For decades now, not just here in South Carolina, but across this country, we've criminalized mental health. We've stopped investing in facilities that can help folk out, and we've started investing in prisons. Believe it or not, I was talking to the sheriff here in Charleston County, and one of the things that she was noting was that the largest mental health facility, as far as beds for folks, is in the jailhouse on Lee's Avenue. That's problematic. We got to do something about it. It's a community issue. It's not just my family. It's not just the Sutherland family. It's all of our families. And so that's why I thought it was important to bring a dear friend of mine, Charlamagne. I'm not going to give his resume. You can Google him. He's very Googleable. But more importantly, he's a native son of this community. And that's why I thought it was so important to bring Charlamagne here today to talk to us specifically the African American community, and also to talk specifically about, as black men, we don't ever deal with, men in general don't deal with it. So Charlamagne, if you would just, can you tell me, like, how did you, don't want to use the woke because I think we all too, I think we're a little more mature for that, but how did you come to this understanding about talking so openly and publicly about good mental health, specifically in the African American community?
Well, thank you, Ja. I mean, for me, it just came from a place of, being a radio personality, being a podcast host, being an author. It's very disingenuous if I get on the radio every day and I speak about things that are going on in other people's lives, but don't speak about what's going on in my life. And, I've always been, a very transparent person. So when I started going down this road, this path of mindfulness, I say about 5 years ago, maybe 5, 6 years ago, when I first started, going to therapy, it was literally just me mentioning it on the radio. I mentioned it on my podcast, and everybody knows when you start going to therapy, you might go for one thing, but then you start peeling back layers and layers and layers of other things, and next thing you know, you're dealing with childhood trauma, and you on there, you're in there discussing issues with your parents. For me, my father, that I didn't even know I really had. Like, you go from like, oh, I love my dad, but then you like, man, I might hate my dad. And it's like, no, I do love my dad. And then you come back around realizing that, hey, my pops was just doing the best he could. That's one thing that I've realized in therapy, especially, when I started being more open about it. My father coming to me and telling me that, he had been on 10 to 12 different medications throughout his life, and he used to go to therapy all the time. So it was just like, man, these challenges have ran in our family. So for me, it literally just came from a place of, this is what I'm doing. It's helping to better me. And I just was having casual conversation about it on the radio. And the next thing you know, it started, coming up in interviews, and, people that we were interviewing had heard me talking about it, so they were being more open about it. So we would just have these conversations, and then I started getting invited to speak at, events like this. And when I put out my second book, titled "Shook One: Anxiety Playing Tricks on Me," it literally was just notes that I was keeping in therapy. When I would leave my therapy sessions, I would write down, different things that I had spoken about, different things that my therapist had told me. And I realized when I was writing this stuff, even when it was time for me to share it with other people, I couldn't necessarily share what my therapist was giving to me, because it's for me, but it helped me to have a better understanding of the issues that I was dealing with. So when I put out my second book, I got a brother named Dr. Ish who went to the University of South Carolina, Dr. Ish Major, and he gave like a lot of the clinical correlations for this new language that I had, found in therapy. Because even though I had been dealing with panic attacks and anxiety and bouts of depression and PTSD my whole life, going to therapy gave me the language to be able to explain it. And so when I put out my second book and brought in Dr. Ish to give these clinical correlations, whether I wanted to or not, I became a mental health advocate. So, sometimes, they say God doesn't call the qualified, he qualifies the called. So I think this was just something that was bigger than me, that's led me here to have these conversations with brothers like you.
That's great, man. Hearing that journey. I was watching an interview of yours, and you cited some great American poets as you kind of talked about the soundtrack of your life, specifically around anxiety. Poets like Beanie Siegel and Jay-Z and the Ghetto Boys. Can you kind of talk about these poets that their stories, their music, how it was a soundtrack for what you were going through as far as your mental health, and like specifically when you were still here at Moncks Corner. Can you kind of talk about that a little bit for us?
First of all, I love that you call them poets because that's exactly what they are. And yeah, they did provide the soundtrack for a lot of, my existence growing up in Moncks Corner, South Carolina. But one thing that, we didn't understand back then was that a lot of the things that we were going through, we didn't know what we were going through. So a lot of that anxiety that we were dealing with, for me, I just thought it was the paranoia that came with the life I was living. I was, running the streets, doing things I didn't have no business doing. So, when you're living that kind of lifestyle, you just think that's natural. It just comes with the territory. And so for me, when I used to have those panic attacks back in the day, I just chalked it up, okay, to, this is the life that I'm living. And so when I, did evolve in life and, became successful, when I still was having those panic attacks and still having that anxiety, that's when it made me realize, like, man, I need to go out here and, like, figure this out. I need to really go get some help for this because the way I'm feeling doesn't reflect my life at this moment. Back in the day, you can just chalk up, paranoia to, yeah, I'm out here selling drugs. So, of course, I'm going to be paranoid. You can, chalk up panic attacks to, yeah, I'm with these, guys and they got guns in the car. Of course, I'm going to have anxiety behind that. But when you, are a father and, you're a husband and, you're living the life you're supposed to live and you're still feeling that way, like something's not right. So, yeah, even though those brothers did provide, soundtracks for me when I was younger, I didn't even realize that what they were talking about back then was anxiety. What they were talking about back then was, PTSD. I didn't realize that until I got older and, started doing the work on myself.
Was there? I got two more questions, and we're going to open up to the panel. Was there like a moment? Like, was there a moment 6 years ago where you said you really started working on yourself? Was there a moment for you that helped you realize, like, man, was there a specific moment, or was there like many moments that led you to getting the help that you need?
Yeah, I mean, it's many moments. For me, it came in a moment of peace. I was actually on vacation, and I was sitting by the pool, and I was looking at my family, and I was looking at all my friends, because that's a form of self-care for me. To take like big family and friend vacations. Even though I don't even like the word friends, like all my family. And so I just remember feeling something I had, man, probably never felt, which was peace. Like, I just felt peaceful. Like, I think a lot of us that are parents, we understand like parental paranoia and just that anxiety that, comes with knowing our kids are just, out there in the world, whether it's something as simple as going to school or, going to a friend's house, for a pool party or something. Like, your mind can go a million different places. And so to see everybody that I love, for the most part with me in that moment, I just felt like peace. And I was just like, man, how can I feel like this all the time? And, I had been having a lot of conversations with a lot of my friends and family. I don't like I said, I don't like the word friends. A lot of my family who have been going to therapy already. And they had already been challenging me to do the work. And so I just said to myself, man, how can I feel this peace all the time without being on vacation? And that's what initially led me to start, going to therapy in the first place.
That's beautiful. And then I'm going to do a little lighthearted question for you, man. And I'm sure you get asked this question all the time. That one of your most famous moments on the Breakfast Club was with Birdman coming in, turned up, wanting to come see you. How in that moment when it was so much energy towards you, so much negative energy towards you, how were you able to, you talked about it, that peace, how were you able to have such collective peace when it was almost in a way, as far as like the way it felt from a viewer, that same aggression that you may have experienced like back in Moncks Corner when you were living a different lifestyle? How were you able to realize the moment that you were in and be real calm and how that whole dynamic went down?
That's a great question. I mean, number one, because I'm not delusional. You know, I know the things that I've said about Birdman over the years. You know what I'm saying? I've been critical of Birdman and some of his business dealings. You know, even though I respect him as an entrepreneur from the South, and you know everything that he's been able to accomplish with Cash Money Records. But yeah, I've been critical about him and some of his business dealings, and you know I've said things and I've made jokes. So when I got the call, you know, a couple of weeks earlier that you know Birdman wanted to come to the Breakfast Club, and he wanted to make sure that I was there, I knew that you know he was gonna have something to say. I just did. So in that moment, it's just like I can't sit there and act surprised, like you know I didn't know that I had been critical of him and that he probably didn't like that. So that's number one, just not being delusional, knowing that you know something you know could go down. And number two, which is something that you know I've always been dealing with in therapy, is that man, I should not be so comfortable in chaos. Like it's like when things are like chaotic around me, that's when I'm calm. But when things are peaceful around me, that's when the anxiety kicks in. It's like, okay, what's about to happen? Everything's going a little too good, you know. When is the other shoe going to drop? Like that's it. I don't know why. It's just so. That's just the way I'm wired, and that's just something that I've always like. That's something that I've just been dealing with in therapy even now. You know, when things are going good, when things are, you know, peaceful and calm, you know, I'm waiting for the BS to happen. But when the drama's happening and the chaos is around me, I'm comfortable with that. And I don't think that's the way things are supposed to be.
It's amazing you talked about that idea of being calm in chaos. Man, that's a powerful line. That's gonna stay with me, brother. Thank you for sharing something so personal.
You know why though, Job? Because I think it's because we're so used to trauma. You know what I mean? When you grow up in a certain environment, you're so used to trauma, you're so used to chaos that like that becomes your norm, and that's what you're comfortable with, right? So it's just like we have this trauma bond with chaos. And you know that's just something I'm trying to break within myself.
Yeah, man, that's powerful. Let's if you don't mind, let's bring in some professionals that can maybe help us, you and I, and also the viewing audience. First, I want to reintroduce the senior pastor of this great church, Pastor Byron L. Benton, to the panel. And the one thing, he has a long bio, but the one thing as I read this impressive bio about Pastor is he said he has a commitment to community and family as it goes. Wait, no, I'm sorry. I'm going to paraphrase it because I got it. He has a commitment to empowering individuals, families, and communities to live spiritually, mentally, and physically healthy lives. That sounds like the pastor that I know, doesn't it, y'all? Next, I want to introduce Dr. Jerez Mitchell. Dr. Jerez Mitchell, Spelman graduate. You gotta mention the HBCU. Give it up for that. Howard University. Give it up for that. But the role I know she holds so dear is mother and wife and community leader. And so, and I consider her a dear friend. So thank you so much, sister, for being here. She has an impressive resume, y'all, but she's just so beautiful, strong black woman. Thank you for being here. And last, but certainly not least, Cynthia Washington Williams. Give it up for her. Licensed professional counselor, and I'm going to tell a personal story. A lot of people don't know. I don't know that the pastor knew this, but years ago, when I was a younger man, she counseled me. And I genuinely feel that the trajectory of my life would have been different if it wasn't for her. So thank you so much for being here. Y'all, let's get into it. Let's chop it up a little bit. I want to just, and you know, how this is going to work to the audience out here is that, you know, I will kind of steer the conversation, but it's going to be free-flowing. Audience members, if y'all feel inclined to ask questions, feel free to do so. But I'm just going to tee it off, and I'm gonna aim this question at Pastor. Pastor, you're mostly, from my understanding of your work, is all around family and community, making sure that the whole person, both spiritually, mentally, and physically, are well, doing God's work. Can you talk to me, because we did a lot of work together in 2020 in the height of the pandemic. Can you talk to me from a community perspective, from your congregation perspective, that mental health challenge that all of us face, not just here in Charleston, not just here in South Carolina, but across the world? Can you kind of talk to us about that and kind of some of the experience you had with folk that you helped counsel and make whole?
Absolutely. And once again, thank you for this today. This is needed, and Charlamagne just did a phenomenal job. I think really setting the atmosphere for this moment. I like to look at things, and I'm a systems therapist, so everything I look at how we interact with systems, because systems we're a part of, and our interaction with the systems determine our growth. So here's the way I typically explain it to our members and just people in general. Let's take an acorn. An acorn has everything it needs within itself to become an oak tree. If you take an acorn and you plant it in good soil where it gets good nutrition, good sunlight, good water, it will grow to be a tree. But you can take that same acorn, put it out on Highway 26, and guess what happens? There's no growth. There's no reaching of the acorn's potential. Now, what's the difference? Is the acorn different? No. The system or the environment that the acorn is engaging with is greatly influencing the trajectory of the acorn's life. So the way I say it is, when God creates us, He creates us to be whole. He creates us so that we have everything we need on the inside of us to become everything we were ever called and purposed to be. But then we begin to interact with a very broken world that breaks us over and over and over again. And in order to then reach our potential, we have to reclaim those broken spaces, those broken places. That's a healing journey that all of us have to go on. And it's not cookie cutter. Just because we look the same, we're from the same hood, we speak the same language, doesn't mean our trajectory of healing is the same. We can be in the same family, have the same parents, have the same wounds, but the way we need to heal looks different. So we need a systemic approach that deals with the totality of who we are, not just compartmentalizing us, which I can go into a whole thing there about how that's a Eurocentric view that greatly hinders the psyche of those of us, especially if you're from an African diaspora heritage. We need a holistic approach that sees us as a whole person, deals with all of us in the system we belong to, so that we can stop this recapitulation of trauma and brokenness that we keep experiencing.
Wow. Wow. Cynthia, talk a little bit about, because what he's talking about is like the system.
Yes.
The system that we all know, as we celebrate Juneteenth, has been holding folk down for a long time. In an environment that is nurtured by this system. So how do we begin to take that acorn and put it in fertile ground? How do we do that?
We do that with conversations like this. Charlamagne, it's a pleasure to be here with you. When you were talking, I actually picked up a water bottle and I just kind of threw it at the screen because of what you said. And that is, trauma has been normalized. Trauma has been normalized in our community. And so how do we begin to heal? We've got to eradicate the stigma. Just in the situation like you were discussing about your brother. If we can eradicate the fact that counseling is not a curse word, if we can unmute the fact that we're silent about mental health, if we can get a checkup from the neck up, just like we do with our general health, we can open the door so that those who are hurting, not based on what you see on the outside, because a lot of the pain is invisible, then we can venture into getting the healing that we need.
Therese, talk about that invisible pain that she's talking about, where you can't see it, and it's hard for people to know to help you because the pain can be invisible, but it can be debilitating. It can be worse than any kind of physical wound that you can have. Can you kind of, how do we heal that invisible pain?
I think it's going to take a lot of different things to heal it, but I think it impacts everybody, particularly black men. Ask a black man, how are you going to work every day? How are you attending to the needs of your household, of yourself? And they'll tell you, I'm just doing it. I'm just getting it done because that's what I have to do. And I think for black men, for anyone, to be able to sit down and say, you know what? Just like Charlamagne said, something's not right. Something doesn't feel good. And that feeling is that your temperature, that feeling is a thing to let you know, like, you have to check in. You have to be able to say, like, okay, things aren't feeling good. I need to go and talk to somebody. And unfortunately, in our community, we've been tasked with this idea of, like, nope, you zip it up, you carry it with you, and you kind of put it in the closet and keep it there. Because you have to be this idea of being strong, or this idea of, like, not feeling weak or not being seen as weak, because that's what society tells us that you have to do. But that's not going to work, and it hasn't worked. And you will fall short every time until you're able to come and sit and talk and be vulnerable about what's going on. And there are people that look like you and understand the culture that goes on, the culture that's behind being a black person in Charleston, being a black person in general, so that we can understand you and sit with you and talk about what it's like and how we can help.
Charlamagne, can you talk a little bit with us about that idea, and I saw an interview you did about how, you know, we as, and Jerez talked about it, we as black men often are made to believe it's strong not to talk about things. We're made to believe that holding things in and suck it up and it's strength, but, you know, as we get older and we get more intellectually mature in our feelings, we know that can be detrimental. Can you talk about that a little bit and how you have found your strength and conversations you have with other brothers around that?
Yeah, definitely. First of all, I receive everything that everybody on the panel is saying. Yeah, I mean, it's just like, you know, growing up, a lot of the things we do is for survival, right? So, you know, if you are honest about your feelings, you're honest about your emotions, you know, you can become prey out here, you know, or as we say in the hood, you can become food, you know, when you tell people that you actually might be, you know, afraid of something, or you tell somebody that you might actually, you know, be going through something, and they start looking at you as soft, like literally. Like, I mean, I grew up in the era where being hard, like that was the slang, like you had to be hard. And we don't even realize, like, man, we're creating a whole generation of sociopaths, because you're teaching, you know, a bunch of brothers to suppress their feelings. You know, one of my favorite songs ever is actually from Mobb Deep, and it's shook one. In the beginning of the song, you know, Prodigy, God Bless the Dead, says, you know, for real brothers who ain't got no feelings, and like that's just not reality. Like if you don't have no feelings, if, you know, you don't have any empathy, or if you don't feel anything when you do anything, you're just a cold-blooded sociopath, maybe psychopath. And so it's just like, for me, that was one of the, you know, big issues when I would be in therapy, and I was like, you know, even unpacking things that, you know, I dealt with my father. Like I realized I was angry at my father because growing up he would get upset with me and discipline me for things that he never even taught me. Right? Like I remember this one example in particular where it was like I was following him. He was driving. I was like 16, so I was following him while he was driving, and he ran the stop sign, so I ran the stop sign. And then he pulled over, and I pulled over, and then he got out, and he smacked me in the face, told me to wake up. It was early in the morning. He was like, wake up. I'm just like, in my mind, I'm thinking like, yo, I'm following you. So what does that do to a young man? It makes a young man, at least for me, never express what I was actually feeling to somebody who was supposed to, you know, teach me better. So I suppressed a lot of that, right? Because I didn't ever want to come off like, you know, I didn't know what I was doing. You know, I didn't ever want to come off like, you know, I wasn't like this super smart, tough, you know, son that my father was trying to raise. But like a lot of that was his job to instill in me. That shouldn't have been like on the job training for for a young teenage boy. So it's just like, yeah, you know, we're taught to suppress a lot of things, and we do suppress a lot of things just because it's almost like it's not almost like we are. We're just trying to survive. Like I don't want my pops to smack me in the face for what I don't know. Or I don't want, you know, one of my homeboys to, you know how I'm really feeling, because he may look at me as soft, and then, you know, I might get, you know, bullied or tried in the hood. So yeah, that's the main reason we're taught to suppress a lot of those things. But as you get older, man, you realize like the only person I'm hurting by not expressing myself is myself. And, you know, I have 3 daughters and a beautiful wife, and if I did not get a handle on my emotions in a real way, then I would have been projecting onto the people who are, you know, the closest to me. And, you know, I'm going to be the generational curse breaker that, you know, passes, you know, more to his kids than trauma.
Yeah, and thrive.
Right,
We
and
want to,
thrive.
shift from just surviving, but actually thriving, enjoying life, enjoying the people around you, and understanding that even if they did make mistakes, they're human,
Right.
just like you're human.
Right.
And you want to be able to live this life in a way that you feel comfortable, you feel heard and seen.
Yes. And one of the things that I want to interject is through good therapy, in some ways, you get correction. In a lot of ways, some of the vicissitudes of life that you walk through that you thought were normal, you find out through good, thorough therapy, that wasn't normal. It wasn't normal that you got smacked in the face. It wasn't normal that you were placed in the role as a child of an adult. It wasn't normal that you went through that because trauma has become normalized. So when you're expressing what you've gone through in therapy, a good therapist is going to let you know that was not normal. Helping you to process and unpack some of that baggage, because what I like to share with people is counseling takes the weight off. Grief will wait on you, and it'll wait on you. So just because years, and I worked in the prison system for 10 years with a lot of inmates and helped them unpack some of that trauma that they went through that was leading them to the type of lives that they were living. Just because you choose not to deal with your trouble, it doesn't go away.
Sure doesn't.
You cannot heal what you hide.
That's a whole word.
Yeah, that's powerful. And yeah, let's clap on that. I tell you a piece that was healing for me. There's an old saying, I can't remember which psychologist came up with it, but it was one of the founders that said, to know is to heal. You know, biblically, we talk about how knowledge liberates, right? To know, knowledge sets us free. Well, for me, understanding the origin story of stuff helps. And understanding where this came from, I think can be liberating. When we were enslaved, men were bred like horses. Your children were taken from you. Everything that you had an emotional tie to was used against you. And your whole value, your concept of identity was tied to just reproducing and how many kids you could reproduce. And that's what they gave you as value. And then just because the bonds from a legal standpoint of slavery are broken, doesn't mean the mental, emotional, and physical,
That's right.
right? Spiritual bonds are not in some way still there. So what I say is what was a coping mechanism to survive in one generation becomes self-imposed shackles in the next generation. And just because legally now we can marry, legally I can raise my family, doesn't mean I receive the emotional intelligence, the emotional connection that I needed from my dad, from my mom, who didn't know how to grieve. And so they just taught me to grieve is to just suck it up and go on, to get over it, son. And so you learn at a young age that you just have to bottle it and become this ticking time bomb. And the system recapitulates. So give me like 30 seconds just to say this thing, because I believe Juneteenth embodies it. You think about this. The Emancipation Proclamation, 1863, right? Civil War ends. And I believe it was April 1865. It's not until June that things happen to where liberation is allowed in Texas. And it's not that they didn't necessarily know about the Emancipation Proclamation. It's not that the slave owners didn't know. It's that until somebody stands up to enforce your liberation, you'll stay in bond even if the law says that you have liberation. Right. And our system here in America consistently legally says you can, but then reinforces a structure that says you can't. You can vote, but we're going to create a structure that makes it hard and tells you you can't. You can get an education, but we're going to create a structure and reinforce the fact that you don't have access to equal education, healthcare, etc. The whole system then begins to work against you because it's still living out of the same DNA that it was birthed from. And I think when we call these things out, when we begin to speak life and we address them so that I no longer feel like I'm crazy for feeling the way I feel, and especially when the news is going to keep on saying, oh, that's not really true, you're delusional, etc., then it allows me the space to be able to at least hear the knowledge of the truth and begin to build towards healing for myself individually, but also the system. And here's the last thing I'll say about that. Because we can pursue healing as much as we want individually, but if the system keeps on knocking me down and traumatizing me over and over and over again, then we're just going to recreate and give birth to the same enslavement mentality, enslavement emotionality, enslavement walk. And so we've got to deal with the system. Otherwise, they'll keep on telling us that we're free and we're living shackled up. Sorry, I get a little hype on this thing. So.
No, man, that's powerful. That is powerful. You know, and it's appropriate you talked about specifically on Juneteenth, specifically thinking about Jamal Sutherland, I am right now, and we think about a system that although the 13th Amendment got rid of abolished slavery, only in the circumstance if you're incarcerated, then you become a slave again. And disproportionately in this state and across this country, black and brown people are incarcerated. So the cycle continues. So many of our loved ones continue to be enslaved, and so that mentality you're talking about, those mental shackles, those mental barriers where we can't ever be whole people continues because it's a perpetuation of slavery, because of the system that you're talking about that was created to keep that going. So what do y'all think? This is an open question. Now, how do we break that system down or readjust the system? And the word we're using now is reimagine a system. And how do we do it not just as elected officials, but community leaders, thought leaders, cultural leaders? How do we do it?
I think we need to reassess who's at the table and talking and making sure that there are people who are aware of mental health concerns at the table. And then figuring out, okay, well, who are the people that we trust to be at that table? Because you can have, medical doctors, you can have mental health professionals there, but if they don't have the background, if they don't understand the community that they're working in, if they don't know about 8 Mile here or 10 Mile or Liberty Hill, if they don't know those communities, then they might need to sit a little bit further and let somebody else who is steeped in working in those communities sit at the table and talk to the people who are making the changes.
I think we also need a deeper level of transparency, like Charlamagne was talking about. I think a lot of the times when I was working with the inmate population, I would share with them, when you go back home, don't go back home preaching, but go back home being transparent. Letting people know, letting your children know, listen, your dad, your uncle, your brother, these are the mistakes I made, because people are following you. And so in order to break the generational curse, we've got to talk about the curse. We've got to be transparent. And a lot of people struggle with that. But there's so much healing when you can be transparent and say, you know what? And I'm a therapist of over 25 years, and I raise my hand. And when I leave here, I'm going to my therapy appointment. Hello, somebody.
Okay.
Because I need a place to be able to just dump. You can't take on working with the world and not take care of yourself. And so I think that there are a lot of things that we need to do to continue this movement. One conversation isn't going to do it. Let's keep talking. Let's keep working. Families, the church. We've got to eradicate the stigma of mental health. Counseling is not a curse word.
And in addition to just not having the conversations, but then acting upon them, right? Because as of right now, everybody's talking about it. Everybody's talking about mental health. Everybody's talking about oh, it's a thing now. Okay, so yes, it's a thing. Now what? What are the next steps? How do we make sure that in the school systems that everyone is aware, you can go to a mental health counselor? How do we make sure, like you said, it's not a curse word? So where are the resources that we can find the folks that we can go and sit with and talk with? It's doing action behind the conversation that I think is the next step that we have to start doing.
Yeah. I would say you own the space that you inhabit.
Yes.
God has given you responsibility. It can be very overwhelming when you look at how problematic these systems are. And then you can become overwhelmed and shut down. But God has given each of us a space that we operate within. And so it's about being a good steward to be the change that we seek. I'm going to jump on and do my confession. I'm in counseling every month during the pandemic. I was in there about every week, just to process. I want to make sure that I'm preventive. I don't want to wait till there's a crisis that comes on. I'm a father. I got 3 girls. I got a wife. I got a church. We're in the middle of a pandemic, all of this. So I already know there's so much going on that I need help. And I don't want it to catch up to me to where I realize I need help before I've already asked for help. So I stay in that place. And that also informs with me to hopefully be a better pastor, a better father, a better person. Because all of us, our righteousness is as filthy rags. We're all just growing each and every day. So I would say on an individual level, but also on whatever the collective level you're on, the boards you sit on, the organizations you're a part of, making sure that we're trauma-informed, that we're sensitive and knowledgeable about these issues. And I'll give you a good example of that. This is something that I told a board that I recently sat on when we were talking about just becoming trauma-informed. I said, as knowledge increases, so is sorrow. That scripture is so true, and the longer I live, the more sorrowful I become. So I get liberated by the knowledge, but I'm saddened by what I learned.
Yes.
There are certain jokes that used to be funny to me that now are sad to me. That's what liberation and knowledge does for you. But it then informs me and empowers me to be an advocate for justice, for love, for healing, and to be an information bearer to the respective places that I'm in. So I would say this to, and I'll just speak to the pastors in a moment, since that's a seat that I sit in. Pastor, you need a therapist. I'm going to tell you flat out, you need a therapist. If you don't believe me, go and have some therapy, and you'll find out by the end of that session, I needed to be here. We cannot change the world if we're not willing to be changed ourselves first. And healing happens from the inside out, which means if I heal my inside, then it can come on to the outside and maybe start touching other people.
When you choose not to deal with your issues, you bleed on people. When you choose not to address your issues, you bleed on people.
And you don't even know you're doing it.
Yeah, open sores, open wounds.
And you bleed on people who didn't touch you.
Ooh.
That's right.
Now, y'all know I'm a preacher, so y'all said something that I gotta say. Because it's profound, right? We talk about doubting Thomas in the Bible, but what gave Thomas his faith back was being able to touch the wounds of Jesus that had been healed. He needed evidence of trauma, but that there was life after trauma in order to believe in a Savior. Think about that for a moment. What we have to be able to do is embody that and to be able to say, I've gone through this trauma, but you can touch me. I'm at a place where it's not as sensitive to touch anymore, where I'm not going to bleed out over you. But when we haven't gotten there, right? Like when Thomas touched him, if Thomas touched, Jesus invites it, right? If Thomas touched him, he found out that there was a scar, but there was healing, which then communicates testimony to Thomas, then there's healing for me.
Right.
There's a journey for me. And that's why I'm a believer, because I need a Savior that's been through something and was able to come through it. Because I'm going through something and I've been through something.
Yes.
And I need to know there's healing on the other side of that.
Right.
And so it's all about life after trauma.
Exactly.
That there is resurrected life. That there's possibility on the other side of it. Sorry, you
No, that's
triggered
good.
the preacher out of me.
I'm sorry.
No,
And so, you know, when you were saying that, what really resonated for me is the importance of transparency. And don't get it twisted. Just because people have a lot of alphabet soup behind their name, they're qualified to sit in the seat.
Oh my.
Because of what they've been through. It's not the degree. Don't get it twisted. Beautiful, anointed, we're qualified to sit here because of what we've been through. Not just some people call and say, do you have this degree? And do you have this pedigree? I have a PhD in trauma. It qualifies me to sit here.
Yeah.
Can we stick here on trauma for a second, because I think we've all just been saddened here in Charleston specifically, but nationally, as we come out of the pandemic and we see the rise in violence in this community alone. I see Eric Watson is in the audience. I mean, just the amount of violence that's been happening in our community. Babies being killed, young people going out to restaurants and clubs being killed. So how do we deal with this? Like, and Charlamagne, you talked about it, like it becomes so common to us, this perpetuation of violence, and we even talk about how Oh, it's this. Especially in Charleston, we have this old saying about when it get hot, people turn up, and So how do we get out of that being normal? How do we get out of this like being a normal thing that we expect to happen every summer? Every summer it gets worse. How do we get out of that cycle as a community?
Pastor said something that really resonated with me. He said that this system tells you that you can, but then it's all of this different legislation and roadblocks that to where you can't. And I think you got to get to the root of the issue when it comes to a lot of these things. Yeah, we all know hurt people, and we all know that it's a lot of brothers and sisters dealing with trauma, and they end up projecting that trauma on the other people who look just like them. But what's the root causes of that hurt? The root cause of that hurt is the lack of opportunity in our communities. The root cause of that hurt is the fact that a lot of these brothers and sisters, they don't have, gainful employment. A lot of these brothers and sisters are just trying to survive, and they just want to keep a roof over their head and food on the table. And we live in this era right now where, man, think about the last year. The black community was already, on the other end of the wage gap, where we haven't been doing well financially, and then COVID hits. A lot of brothers and sisters lose their job. So you take a people who were already hungry, now they're even hungrier, and now you open the world back up, but you haven't even really healed that wound. Like, these people are still, just as hurt as they was before the pandemic. Now they're even in a worse situation. Man, with social media, where it looks like everybody is living the good life, everybody's balling. I remember Tupac did this interview with MTV decades ago, and he spoke about how if people are knocking on a door and they're saying they're singing, and they'll please, I'm hungry, please let me in. I'm hungry, please let me in. And nobody answers the door, but then somebody opens the door up just a little bit, and the person on the other side of the door can see that they're having a full feast in there. I sang and I danced and I asked you nicely for some food. You didn't provide it. Now that I got a little more aggressive, so you open the door, but you still don't let me in. But I can peek and I can see that y'all in there having a full feast. What's the next step? The next step is I'm gonna kick in the door, and I'm gonna come in and I'm gonna try to hurt somebody because I really need to eat. That is the first law of survival, is self-preservation. So you really got to get to the root of why it's so much violence in our community. I promise you, if you could actually provide these kids with opportunity, and you could actually provide these kids with resources to thrive, as the sister said, and they're not just trying to survive, you would see a decrease in violence immediately.
Yeah, one of the pieces with that is we know that anger is a secondary emotion.
That's right.
So the question is never, why are you angry? The question is, who hurt you?
What happened?
Or what hurt you? And the level of anger that you see displayed is a good measure of the level of pain that's underneath it. So when you see these acts of violence, when you see the uprise of gang warfare, when you see all of this, we automatically know that there's a deeper pain that is the underbelly of all that. But it goes back to what we talked about before. We can't even own that pain. You can't speak that pain. To acknowledge that pain, right, is toxic when you're on that side. But we know on this side of healing that actually not acknowledging it is toxic. And so the cycle begins to recreate and recapitulate itself because there's no place to earn the hurt. And what begins to fester and go into that hurt? The anger, the rage. See, looking in through the window, as Charlamagne was talking about, seeing that other people are eating well. And you deserve it as much as they do. Especially even, and get close enough to actually know how they got the food. Get close enough to actually know how they treat people. And yeah, anger begins to rage. I remember when I learned so much history for the first time, when I got to A&T and actually learned my history for the first time, I remember for 3 months just being mad. For 3 months just being mad. Because of how much truth. And interestingly enough, Millicent Brown was my African American studies professor at A&T, a native Charlestonian who is an amazing historian. And she probably doesn't even remember this, but I came to her office hours asking her questions just so she could help me resolve all the pain that was going on the inside of me. And because I was afraid I was going to do something that I would regret. And I didn't know how to channel that anger. And that's how I knew she was a part of the civil rights movement and all of that back in the day. So I'm like, I need a way to channel this that is positive, that actually builds up instead of tears down. But I had to be taught that. I had to be mentored in that. I had to have people who cared enough about me to surround me and love me and allow me to make mistakes and lift me up and not emphasize my mistakes or judge me by them, but cover me, right? Not disqualify me, but uplift me. And so I think personally, just reflecting on this and knowing what it's like to be mad, and now I just give a disclaimer when I'm in settings. I say, look, I'm real passionate about this. So you need to know my voice may rise up. It's nothing, I'm just passionate. And I think it's important for us to have a space, at least me, where I can be passionate and own me and my story and understand that if you reject me, that's not my fault. That's not my problem. That's where you are. And that I don't have to be defined by your rejection.
So, we have just a few minutes left before we wrap. I want to open it up to the audience. If the audience has any questions they would like to ask the panel, we'll open it up for a few minutes. All hearts and minds are clear? Oh, we got a question right here.
You spoke about having funds raised for mental health awareness.
Is the mic on, y'all?
All right.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, you spoke about having funds for mental health awareness, and right now I'm currently studying to become a marriage and family therapist. And so, are there funds available for therapists to support those who can't afford? Because I don't want to place a label on someone just for them to be able to get therapy.
Right. I think what the additional funds and I should have iterated a little bit closely, what the additional funds that we've been fighting for were around specific stuff. One is around transportation of mental health patients, specifically those that are leaving some type of detention type of setting. The other funds is set up for what we call these crisis intervention units, and pretty much what they are is say in a mental health facility and or out on the streets, if a person is displaying a mental health crisis, this unit should be dispatched out, not the police funding for that as well. But there is a need, as you mentioned, for additional funding for exactly what you're talking about, because there is money in the budget, but not enough. That's why this is one legislative session, and the tragedy of Jamal Sutherland brought it to the attention of the governor, down to the chair of Ways and Means, down to a new legislator like me, the importance of it. So it's continued work that needs to be done. There is money, but not enough. It's something I would love to continue after this panel discussion, let's talk about it. Let's figure out, because I'm not an expert on mental health, but I have trauma, as y'all mentioned, in close proximity to it. So I'm learning how to be more of an advocate and do my part. So I would love to talk with you afterwards to see what we can do and what you're talking about, because I think that's important.
Hey, John, it's very important. That's why earlier this year, I launched my foundation called the Mental Wealth Alliance. And, what we want to do, over the next 5 years is raise $100 million so we can partner with different Black-led organizations and experts, to activate what we're calling our three major pillars of life-changing impact. Like, three major pillars of my organization are train, teach, and treat. And, by training, we're going to prepare, thousands of Black people to become research and clinical service providers in psychology, social work, and other related fields through training, and by establishing scholarship funds to provide training to increase the number of mental health care professionals from 4% to 14%, just to mirror, the Black population, who's in need of culturally aligned mental health support. And the teach pillar is we're advocating for the implementation of SEL and mental health literacy in public schools from kindergarten through 12th grade, nationwide on a federal, state, and local level. And the treat pillar is just to support culturally competent organizations in providing free therapy to more than 10 million Black Americans over the next 5 years, just by supporting, existing organizations and the funding of new organizations. So, a lot of times, man, we sit back and we, wait on, government and legislation to do things for us. But, I feel like, I can pull in enough resources, and I have enough, networks around me that, we can do a lot of this funding for this work on our own.
That's beautiful. Name the organization again, Charlamagne.
It's called the Mental Wealth Alliance. So you can go to mentalwealthalliance.org. And we had a soft launch in February, and we've raised some money, and so we've been doing a few things behind the scenes. But next month is Black Mental Health Month, and so we have an initiative that we'll be rolling out at the top of next month. And so for me, it's just like actually having a foundation to build on a lot of the work that I've been doing just on my own. Like, a lot of these organizations, I've been coming out of pocket, to help. And, even with the scholarships with South Carolina State a couple of years ago, when I opened up the endowment fund at South Carolina State University, in order to even get a scholarship, you have to be in communications, because I do TV and radio, or English, because my mother, is an English teacher, and so that's what she majored in at South Carolina State. She's an alumni at South Carolina State, and something in the mental health space. So if you go into any three of those fields, you can apply for the scholarship that I opened up at South Carolina State. So this organization that I launched early this year is just building on a lot of the work that I've been doing.
That's beautiful, man. I have a question here, sister.
Really quickly, how do you feel education plays a role in changing the myth, the narrative, for people who look like us, that walk into schools that are not built for them, that do not specialize in things that they deal with, or just dealing with how odds are stacked against them, and they know that. Young people know that. They're frustrated when they walk in schools. Their teachers are not knowledgeable about the things that they deal with. I could go on and on, but anyway, you understand what I'm saying. How do you feel? What do you suggest, ways to change that, or ways to encourage them to keep going? Of course, we say education, but as you said, Pastor, the systems are not built for them to be successful, or built for us to be successful. So how do we counteract those feelings of, being slighted or isolated or separated?
Yeah. So when the Confederacy lost the Civil War, they picked up the pen. And they learned that if they can control the narrative, then they can still live out their vision. And so you had the Daughters of the Confederacy, who were responsible for most of the statues that went up. But bigger than that, they became responsible for a lot of the textbooks that were written, and etc. Because literally, if you can rewrite history and spread misinformation and disinformation, then you can change the reality that the people are living. To counter that, historically, we come from a narrative tradition of making sure that the truth is passed on. And prior to integration, we were able to do that more so in a bubble. One of the negative aspects of integration, and Dr. King was here near the end of his life, and this was a pivot that was more towards where Malcolm X was that just because we're together doesn't mean we're equal, or that you see me equally, or that there's equity. Which means now we have to push for that to happen. I believe one of the ways is we've got to go back to owning and teaching and making sure that the narrative is being told. Understanding that bulking up against a system that state by state now is against critical race theory and all these other things that are going on, that we need a stopgap in the in-between in case politicians still want to act like they acted. And we've got to own it. Our schools started in our churches, even Morehouse and Spelman. You know, we've got to own this narrative and make sure that we are communicating what the truth is, even if the kids aren't getting it outside these doors. And I would love for us to push as well for it to happen, but let's be honest. We know we're only going to get so far right now. And there's a whole generation that's growing up. My daughters are growing up in this. So they need to know. It's one of the reasons why I'm grateful to J.A. Moore, who made it so that my daughter could meet now Vice President Kamala Harris, so she could see somebody that looks like her and identify with that. That was done because of us working internally and making sure that we're building. So I think it's both, to summarize it. I think we've got to do a better job of owning it ourselves, making sure that there's rites of passage programs for our children, where they're being instilled with this. We've got to be knowledgeable. If we're honest as adults, there's been a whole couple generations now that have gone by, and a lot of us, we don't know. We don't know what to give it. So we've got to do it on an individual level, as well as pushing for legislature, pushing for our schools, etc., to do a better job of telling the truth in the full history of America, not just cutting and slicing and doing what you want to do to paint a narrative that benefits you.
To add to that, I would say I think it would also be helpful to create safe spaces for children to come into and to talk to the elders, talk to people who have gone through it. We've actually started one of those programs, and it's called Cut to Conversations, where we take black men, take the history of the barbershop, right? Because in the barbershop, all men can come in there, no matter if you're on the street, no matter if you're, part of any organization, police chiefs, everybody can come into the barbershop, and that's a neutral space. And so utilizing spaces like that have already have that internal, those boundaries, and say like, hey, brother, let me tell you about this. Let me tell you how to tie a tie. Let's talk about what it means to be a black man and what that really means. Utilizing those sort of spaces, I think, will be helpful in making sure that the children understand, like, okay, what do I need to do? Who do I need to be? Who can I go and talk to if I don't have a father in the home, or if I don't have an uncle who I can go and talk to? Those sort of things. And I think the other side of this coin is for parents, right? Because parents have power. Parents' voices can really shift what's happening in their school systems. I know the Urban League right now is working with parents to try to do empowerment for them so that they know, like, go to the PTA meetings, go to the city council meetings, go to school board meetings and talk about what's your concern, what's a concern for you and your child, because that is what's going to start to shift things. Because if we leave it to other people to do,
That's right.
they don't really know what's going on. They don't know the concern of your child that they're getting bullied on the bus. They don't know that the bus isn't picking them up at a certain time or at the right stop. It's the parents now that we have to say, okay, parents, you've got the voice, you've got the power. Let's figure out how we can get all of you guys together and move forward.
And I think that some organizations need to reevaluate, reassess, and look at some of the whys based on some of the things that we're doing. Is it relevant today? or can we reassess, realign, and do some other things that are going to help move the ball forward, help to be better advocates for our young people. And I'm going to say, in the past year, a lot of adolescents have come forth and said, I need somebody to talk to. My parents are driving, one little boy told his mama, you're driving me crazy. I'm going to talk to Miss Williams. The adolescents are saying, I need somebody to talk to. So this generation, to me, is embracing. They don't have the stigma that I would say the seasoned folks do. But I just think taking more of an advocacy role. Check out what's our why, and is it relevant today?
Yeah.
Can
And
we
I think
do more?
This generation, it's because of people like Charlamagne, people like Taraji, who are saying like,
Yes.
hey, like mental health, let's talk about it. And this generation with social media and everything else, they're saying like, okay, well then let's talk about it. Let's go into, these rooms and forums and say like, yeah, I have depression, I have anxiety. What do I need to do now? Now that it's identified, what are the next steps?
And let's be real, like our kids know that mommy's not well. Daddy's not well. This ain't right. And they're looking for a way now because of social media and other things, you're able to see and ascertain this ain't right. And I commend this generation because they seem to be a bit more outspoken and communicative than others have been. It's no longer a generation where it's, hey, you just go over there, shut up and sit down.
Yeah, no, they're not doing that.
Right? They're not doing that. And some of it is, I think our generation was raised that way. And we made it a point to where we don't want our children to be like that. But then, I don't know about y'all, but then it's like, well, what do I do with this little person who just said what they just said? because I know what would have happened to me.
Right.
And I'm trying not to be that.
Right.
But at the same time, this has to be dealt with.
I'm trying to be an evolved human.
Right. So now I need help because I've gone at this a different way, but I don't quite know the way I'm trying to go. And I'm afraid of pendulum to the other side of this thing and raising a child that just think they can say anything, any kind of way, whenever, and that's going to be okay, because that's going to be another problem. And so now, I know even with me personally, in having to teach my daughters how to address their emotions, I'm having to relearn and learn deeper how to address my own so I can be present with them.
That's good.
That's good.
Emotional intelligence.
Emotional intelligence. And so I think going back to what Dr. Jerez was saying, we have to all buy into it together. That as the parents, we have to realize, and that it's okay, that we're figuring this thing out. And we're going to figure it out a little bit. Now, you're going to respect me. I'm still your daddy, But we're going to figure this whole emotional intelligence, expressive stuff out together. And I'm with you in it. Because at the end of the day, the ministry of presence is the greatest ministry all of us have. We don't have to know the answer. We just have to be willing to be present with our loved ones.
That's good.
Be present. Like when my wife's mother died last year, it was devastating to me because I couldn't stop her pain. And me feeling as the man that I should fix this, I gotta control this, almost caused me to tap out on her because she's hurting and I can't stop it. And it was in counseling and processing through my emotions that I realized, you're making this about you. And it's supposed to be about her. You've got to sit with her in the emotions, and if you cry too, you cry too. And maybe she needs to see that. So I didn't mean to go into all that. I just wanted to give an example, though, of how it's all about us being present in it together and working together through it as the parent and as the children as we journey along.
I'm for the sake of time, thank everybody for being here. But I used to do, before my political career, when I was a younger person, I used to do stand-up comedy. And hopefully there's no tapes of that. But what I would always say, the type of comedy that I would do would be all personal. And I would always say this idea of group therapy, this idea when you get people and I was be on a stage and be communicative of like the emotions that you go through, and people can be there with you, for me is the best kind of therapy, for me personally. And so this has been therapeutic for me. I want to thank everybody in the audience and the participants, the panelists. I feel more whole that we did this today, and I'm gonna let everyone kind of go around the room. Charlamagne, since you're virtual, I'll kind of start with you, and then we'll go Pastor and Jerez, and then we'll end with you, Ms. Williams.
I just want to thank you for having me be a part of the panel, and I want to thank everybody on the panel because, I received a lot of information today. I received everything that, the brothers and sisters are saying. I feel full at this very moment. And the only thing I would tell people is, deal with your trauma. Because if you don't deal with your trauma, eventually your trauma is going to deal with you.
Wow. That's powerful. I echo, it's a great honor, one, Jay, for you to bring this here and to bring it to our church, and just the work you're doing, it means a lot. Charlamagne, for you to remain committed to this and to be the example and trailblazer, it means a lot. I'll close just by saying we need all hands on deck, that healing requires intentionality. By default, we're unhealthy. You'll never go home and say, I accidentally ate healthy today. I accidentally worked out today. I accidentally had a caring conversation of intentionality around healing and growth. No, we have to plan it. It takes a lot of energy and work. But the more of us that are bought into it together, the more beauty we can see happen and flourish. And what I've learned is God will take a little and make it a lot. That at the end of the day, there's a work from a force that is greater than our own. If we're willing just to do our little part, we can see amazing things happen in our individual lives, our families, and our community. And I believe today was a huge step towards that, and that there'll be great healing that comes. And this was deeply filling for me personally too. So thank each of you so much.
Jay, thank you for putting this on. You didn't have to, but you did. And so I thank you for doing that. Charlamagne, thank you for being here as well, being an advocate and your willingness to be, like she said, transparent and making sure that this thing isn't a curse word, right? That everyone knows it's okay to get that checkup from the neck up. And Pastor, thank you as well. For everyone out there who's dealing with something, find your therapist. Go to therapy. It will be okay. And if you go to a therapist and you don't like them, that's okay. Tell them. Tell them you don't like them, and then find you another one. Just like you would go to your PCP.
That's right.
If you don't like your general practitioner, then you find somebody else. But get your therapist, see your therapist. It is not an issue to go to therapy. And you don't have to be in there for a whole lot of time. A couple of sessions will get you feeling a lot better. And then just like your car, you get a checkup on your car, you go back into therapy when you need it. But utilize it. It is something that can be so helpful for you and so beneficial for you. And it can make you feel more whole. And for anyone who is just struggling, we all struggle. All of us up here, struggle, have issues and concerns, and we talk to people, and we talk to our therapists, and we become better people. And so I just encourage and want to, for anyone out there who needs it, utilize it. There are many websites that you can go to, psychologytoday.com if you need support. Just please do this for you because we care about you and we want you to take care of yourself. And that is a part of self-care. And you'll hear everyone talk about self-care. Everybody's doing self-care. You should, because it's not selfish to take care of yourself.
I'm going to close out with something that I said earlier, and that is that counseling is not a curse word. The importance of getting your checkup from the neck up is really, really important. And the issues of life come to the forefront in relationship. when you become a parent, when you're raising that child, when you are in a relationship. That is when your issues actually emerge. Mental health, it's important. You're worth it. You're worth it.
Yeah.
You cannot heal what you hide. The silence around mental health is deafening.
Thank y'all so much. God bless.
Jay, I feel, can we give J.A. a big hand? If you don't mind, I feel like we should close in prayer.
Amen.
Because this was heavy. And we're going to do this differently. It's going to be 2 minutes, but I want to invite you to just close your eyes and take a really deep breath and breathe out slowly. Take another deep breath in and breathe out real slow. And one more deep breath and breathe out, and we're going to sit in silence for just a moment. Now, as you sit in that place of silence, I want you to begin to imagine all the things in your mind that you are thankful and grateful for. Envision them, see them, the things that give you joy and make you happy about this life. In your own way, begin to express gratitude. Begin to thank God for the good things you have, for the things that bring you joy, the people that you've been blessed to travel with in this thing called life. God, we thank you that in the midst of this broken world, we still have many things to give you thanks about. As we leave this moment, may we take with us all the nuggets that would make our life more meaningful, would help us to become repairers of the breach. May we be your wounded healers. May we be the ones who can speak truth that liberates people. May we be your hands and feet in a very lost and dark world. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Can he autograph my book virtually?
I think
Definitely. Next time, I'm gonna be in town next month. I'm gonna definitely do that. I'm gonna connect with Ja. I'm gonna be in town. I'm actually gonna be in town, yeah, for the 4th. So.
I will get with you, man. Salute, man. Thanks a
Thank
lot.
you very much. Thank you, everybody. All right.
you.